Hi, I'm Synth and welcome back. Have you noticed that many synth tutorials are not that exciting to listen to? It's because they're usually trying to show off just a single concept, so you often get simple and not very interesting sounds. So this week's video is about a way to maximize the tonality of a synth sound and how to do so using a chainsaw oscillator and the mighty NerdSEQ, which is a tracker. So it's time to get nerdy. And thankfully, my dastardly long COVID health issue has taken kind of a back seat the past couple of weeks. It looks like the drug I'm taking, low dosage naltrexone, which is really common for people with long COVID, it's batting down the inflammation that I've been having, at least for a while. So I have enough energy to make another video. Not a cure, but it's a reduction in the symptoms, and that's as good as I can hope for right now. A little overview about how synths work. There's usually three parts. There's the oscillator, then the filter, and the special effects. The oscillator is things like sine waves. Really can be simple waves, or it can be more interesting sawtooth waves, or it can be really complicated waves that do all sorts of crazy things. This is really the input to the system. And as I say, garbage in, garbage out, the better input you can have, the better your sounds can be. In fact, the oscillators can create too much, and so that's why it's passed to a filter. And a filter can do things like take out some of the low frequencies, the high frequencies. It can also add resonance. And what that does is it makes the sound less harsh and more interesting. And then the last part, the special effects, are things like delay, reverb. What that does is it adds on top of the sound, and it can make it stereo as well. All three are needed to make a sound interesting, but today we're going to be talking about the oscillator and how to create the most interesting sounds possible. There's a really cool oscillator called the chainsaw. Instead of boring sine waves, the chainsaw module produces multiple saw waves or square waves, called super waves. Such waves have sharp corners, which means that they're actually made out of multiple sine waves, which means multiple frequencies. They therefore create timbre, additional elements such as harmonics that make the sound more interesting. I'll provide some examples of waves. First, a sine wave. You can see that the chainsaw, by using square and sawtooth waves, can make more interesting sounds. The chainsaw module is especially relevant because XOR, the makers of the NerdSEQ, is coming out this fall with a dual chord expander, which will do similar things and more. Quick pause here. What exactly is timbre, and how on earth are you really supposed to pronounce this French word?
Timbre.
Okay, timbre it is. So it's not just the pitch or the loudness of a sound, it is the richness of it, and it really depends on the voice or the instrument. And there's all sorts of ways of talking about timbre. And timbre is also about polyphony, where you're playing more than one frequency at a time. Now I'm going to show you the output of the chainsaw. It's hooked up directly to the oscilloscope and also to the output so you can hear it. Now when I change the wave, right now it's a combination of triangle waves, and I'm going to change it to a combination of square waves. And so you can see that the waves get squared off, and the sound changes. Triangle, and square. So you can see that the triangle sound is actually more interesting. And that's because there's more overtones there. But another big thing is the detune feature. And so what this does is it separates out those waves. And you can change the frequency using the knob on the top. Next, I'm going to hook up a couple of random inputs to the chainsaw oscillator. And so I'm going to hook one of them up to the detune. And actually, I should turn up the volume here. So this is the detune. And now I'm going to hook up this other one to the pitch. So you can see that we're getting some pretty interesting sounds here. But a big thing to point out is that we're only using a single pitch input, and there's 3 of them. So you think that the next step would be just to hook up voltages to all 3 of the inputs. And that way we're using all 21 of the super waves. That should be really interesting sound. Let's try that. I'll turn up the volume. Okay, that sounds pretty bad. And what's going on is that we just have 3 random pitches happening at once. To our ears, that doesn't sound good at all. What we really need are some kind of chords where the 3 pitches are related to each other. That maybe the bass note is random, but that the other notes are chords. What about the detune? Well, let me show you. So I'll turn up the volume and change the detune. Okay, that sounds even more muddled. What we really want are chords, major, minor, augmented, diminished, to convey a feeling. That makes the sounds even more interesting. Excellent timbre. But how do you achieve the ability to create chords as input to the chainsaw? Most modular synth modules are monophonic, meaning they only put out a single sound at a time. There's some fancy modules that can output chords, but not that many. And once again, I'm going to show off the NerdSEQ because it can do so much. This is the NerdSEQ. It allows you to create tracks. So each of these are tracks here, and each track can play various sounds. And what I'm going to do is create a pattern to play in track 1. And I'll give it a note now. I'm within the pattern. I'll just see. Yeah, we want a little bit lower than that. Okay, that sounds good. So that is a note. It is C in the 2nd octave. Important thing is that you can add NerdSEQ effects to these notes. And so what I'm going to do is find the special effect. There's so many of them. And what I'm looking for is the chord mode. Found it. Here's the chord mode. Click OK. And so it is the FCRD. And then I can go over and specify which chord to play. And so if I just step through these, I can see on the bottom here, like this would play a triad diminished augmented. That's not really what I want. I want to do something a bit simpler. And so I'm going to look at the lower one. So like the first one is a minor 2nd. And so that'll actually output 2 tones, but the chainsaw has capability for 3, so I want to do a bit more than that. Now this is a major 2nd, still not that interesting. Okay, now we're getting to someplace, minor 3rd. Let's move on a little bit here. Okay, now it's saying that it's going to do 3 outputs here, and this is going to be a major triad. That sounds good, so we'll accept that. And now we're going to give it another note. I will say, instead of C2, I'll just go up a little bit. F2 sounds good. And now I'm going to give it the same type of chord. Should be able to find it more easily this time. Let's give it a minor chord. Let's keep it at this note. So it remembers that I'm trying to deal with chords here. But I'm going to give it a minor one. It's a triad major, and now it's saying triad minor. I have just 3 notes put in here. Let's try playing it. Now what we need to do is hook up some cables. These are to the 3 outputs. It says CV1 through 3, so I've hooked it up to CV1 through 3. Now I need to play it, and I'm going to turn up the volume here and hit start. So it's playing these different bass notes with the major and minor chords. Major, minor. And so now we have a much more interesting sound, and I can change the detune. So you hear the pure chords. If I turn up the detune, oh, that's distorted, but here we go. So this is a pretty rich sound, and it is major and minor. Now we have not just 21 saw waves, but we also have chords, and so we have interesting timbre. This has been an interesting journey. And so now we have much more interesting sounds without even putting it through a filter or special effects. We've really come a long way here, creating more interesting sound. That's it for now. See you soon.